Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining today's reading. Today we are going to read from Chant and Be Happy. Before reading this, we offer our prayers to the Vaishnava-Acharyas, which you can see on the screen. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakhanvitanscha Namavom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Yevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today's reading will be Chant and Be Happy. The power of mantra meditation based on the teachings of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, Founder-Ācārya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Before reading, we're going to thank Bhaktivedanta Book Trust for making all the books available for us so that everyone can get the benefit out of it in English. And also we want to thank the Veda base maintainers. As you can see here in the bottom, all the different devotees who are maintaining Veda base and making all these books available for us on the internet. So thank you very much for all those devotees. So again, starting, thank and chant and be happy. Words from Judge Harrison. Everybody is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. Krishna is God, the source of all that exists, the cause of all that is, was, or ever will be. As God is unlimited, He has many names. Allah, Buddha, Jehovah, Rama. All are Krishna. All are one. By serving God through each thought, word, and deed, and by chanting of His holy names, the devotee quickly develops God consciousness. By chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, one inevitably arrives at Krishna consciousness. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Dedication. We dedicate this book to our beloved spiritual master and guide, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, who brought the transcendental teachings of Lord Krishna, including the authorized science of reincarnation, to the Western world, the authors. The search for happiness. Everyone wants to be happy. Some of us seek happiness through our families, in natural and healthy living, in successful careers, active social lives, fine gourmet foods, gambling, or through sports and exercise. Others experience happiness in politics, the arts, academia, or in hobbies ranging from mechanics and computer science to drama, philanthropy, welfare work, and literally thousands of other activities that comprise humankind's unending quest for pleasure. Millions of people find their happiness in liquor, mood elevators, tranquilizers, or other drugs. Each day, doctors and scientists discover more about how the human mind and body work. Yet, with this abundance of scientific knowledge and space-age technology, which vastly outstrips all previous generations, are modern people really and any happier than their predecessors? The basic problem in our search for happiness is that our sources of pleasure are all limited. What many people consider our most basic and fundamental pleasures, eating and sex, can only occupy a few moments of each day. Our bodies constantly thwart our plans for enjoyment. After all, you can only eat so much before becoming ill. Even sex has its limits. Chant and Be Happy provides information about how we can expand our pleasure beyond our present limitations. It deals with a pleasure principle that operates beyond the bounds of time and space and emanates from the innermost part of our being. This book thoroughly explains how this inner happiness can be experienced immediately by anyone through the mystical power of transcendental sound vibrations. This technique for obtaining unlimited happiness does not depend on new products touted by Fleet Street's whiz kids or Hollywood moguls, but has been successfully practiced by countless people throughout the ages. Chant and Be Happy explains how to use these transcendental sound vibrations to attain the ultimate state of happiness. It is an easy process and it is free. To achieve this unlimited and imperishable happiness, one need only chant and hear what sages of ancient India have for millennia called the great chant for deliverance, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This simple 16-word mantra is comprised of sound vibrations powerful enough to awaken the natural happiness within everyone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In recent years, millions have learned how to chant the Hare Krishna mantra and experience this true spiritual happiness. It is the most popular mantra in India, the homeland of meditation, and differs from other systems in two ways. First, the complete mantra is chanted, not just a fragment of a mantra. And second, the mantra is chanted aloud, not silently. A brief introduction by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, the founder and spiritual master of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, explains the exact nature and meaning of the mantra. Chapter 1, an exclusive interview with the late George Harrison, reveals how the Hare Krishna mantra played a leading role in his life over the years. George explains that although he had achieved riches and fame beyond what most people could ever hope for, he found that there was nothing higher than the happiness he experienced from chanting Hare Krishna. George discusses his confidence in the mantra's power over death, explains how much of his musical career was influenced by and intimately connected with the Hare Krishna mantra, and describes the knowledge, bliss, and spiritual intelligence that comes from chanting. In chapter 2, Srila Prabhupada speaks with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and George Harrison at John's estate in Tittenhurst Park, discussing the potency of the Hare Krishna mantra as the path to peace and liberation. Chapter 3 is a fascinating account of how Srila Prabhupada brought the chanting of Hare Krishna from India to the Western world in the midst of the countercultural turmoil of the 60s, and convinced the disillusioned hippies of New York's Greenwich Village and San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury that this mantra, not psychedelic drugs and anti-war protests, would make them happy. The history of chanting and meditating for higher consciousness is discussed in chapter 4. The next chapter delineates the life and teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 16th century saint, mystic, and incarnation of Lord Krishna, who popularized the timeless practice of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Chapter 6, a narration taken from one of India's most important historical and philosophical literatures, the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, reveals how by simply hearing the chanting of Hare Krishna from a genuine spiritual master, anyone's character can be freed from all unwanted qualities. The next chapter forms a treatise on self-realization, mantras, religion, and the power of the mind in meditation, compiled from the teachings presented in Srila Prabhupada's books. Chapter 8 explains the wide-ranging effects and personal benefits one can expect from chanting Hare Krishna. The final chapter gives practical step-by-step instructions for chanting, which, if followed, will open the door to ultimate happiness. On chanting. Shortly after His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada brought the Hare Krishna mantra to the West in 1965, Hare Krishna became a household word. In 1979, Dr. A.L. Basham, the world's leading authority on Indian history and religion, wrote of the Hare Krishna movement. It arose out of nothing in less than 20 years and has become known all over the West. This, I feel, is a sign of the times and an important fact in the history of the Western world. But what exactly do the words Hare Krishna mean? In this short essay from the album Krishna Consciousness, which first introduced the Beatles, George Harrison, and John Lennon to the chanting, Srila Prabhupada explains the meaning of the Hare Krishna mantra. The transcendental vibration established by the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's pronounced, as you can see there, Hare Krishna, Rama. Is a sublime method for reviving our transcendental consciousness. As living spiritual souls, we are all originally Krishna conscious entities. But due to our association with matter from time immemorial, our consciousness is now adulterated by the material atmosphere. The material atmosphere in which we are now living is called Maya, or illusion. Maya means that which is not. And what is this illusion? The illusion is that we are all trying to be lords of material nature, while actually we are under the grip of our stringent laws. When a servant artificially tries to imitate the all-powerful master, he is said to be an illusion. We are trying to exploit the resources of material nature, but actually we are becoming more and more entangled in her complexities. Therefore, although we are engaged in a hard struggle to conquer nature, we are ever more dependent on her. This illusory struggle against material nature can be stopped at once by revival of our eternal Krishna consciousness. Chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the transcendental process for reviving this original pure consciousness. By chanting this transcendental vibration, we can cleanse away all misgivings within our hearts. The basic principle of all such misgivings is the false consciousness that I am the Lord of all I survey. Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition on the mind. This consciousness is the original natural energy of the living entity. When we hear this transcendental vibration, this consciousness is revived. This simplest method of meditation is recommended for this age. By practical experience also, one can perceive that by chanting this Maha Mantra or the great chanting for deliverance, one can at once feel transcendental ecstasy coming through from the spiritual strata. In the material concept of life, we are busy in the matter of sense gratification, as if we are in the lower animal stage. A little elevated from this status of sense gratification, one is engaged in mental speculation for the purpose of getting out of the material clutches. A little elevated from this speculative status, when one is intelligent enough, one tries to find out the supreme cause of all causes, within and without. And when one is actually on the plane of spiritual understanding, surpassing the stages of sense, mind, and intelligence, he is then on the transcendental plane. This chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is enacted from the spiritual platform. And thus, this sound vibration surpasses all lower state of consciousness, namely sensual, mental, and intellectual. There is no need, therefore, to understand the language of the mantra, nor is there any need for mental speculation, nor any intellectual adjustment for chanting this Maha Mantra. It is automatic, coming from the spiritual platform, and as such, anyone can take part in the chanting without any previous qualification. Of course, in a more advanced stage of spiritual understanding, one is expected to avoid committing offenses. But there is no doubt that chanting takes one immediately to the spiritual platform. And one shows the first symptom of this in the urge to dance along with the chanting of the mantra. We have seen this practically. Even a child can take part in the chanting and dancing. Of course, for one who is too entangled in material life, it takes a little more time. But even such a materially engrossed man is raised to the spiritual platform very quickly. When the mantra is chanted by a pure devotee of the Lord in love, it has the greatest efficacy on hearers. And as such, this chanting should be heard from the lips of a pure devotee of the Lord, so that immediate effects can be achieved. The word Hara is the form of addressing the energy of the Lord, and the words Krishna and Rama are forms of addressing the Lord himself. Both Krishna and Rama mean the supreme pleasure, and Hara is the supreme pleasure energy of the Lord. Change it to Hare in the vocative. The supreme pleasure energy of the Lord helps us to reach the Lord. The material energy called Maya is also one of the multi-energies of the Lord, and we, the living entities, are the marginal energy of the Lord. The living entities are described as superior to material energy. When the marginal energy is in contact with the inferior material energy, as incompatible situation arises. But when the marginal energy is in contact with the superior energy, Hara, it is established in its happy normal condition. These three words, namely Hare, Krishna, and Rama, are the transcendental seeds of the Maha Mantra. The chanting is a spiritual call for the Lord and his energy to give production to the conditioned soul. This chanting is exactly like the genuine cry of a child for its mother. Mother Hara helps the devotee achieve the Supreme Father's grace, and the Lord reveals himself to the devotee who chants this mantra sincerely. No other means of spiritual realization is as effective in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy as the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chapter 1. The Hare Krishna Mantra. There is nothing higher. A 1982 interview with George Harrison. If you open up your heart, you will know what I mean. We have been polluted so long, but here is a way for you to get clean. By chanting the names of the Lord, and you will be free. The Lord is awaiting on you all to awaken and see. Awaiting on you all, from the album All Things Must Pass. In the summer of 1969, before the dissolution of the most popular music group of all time, George Harrison produced a hit single, Hare Krishna Mantra, performed by George and the members of the London Radha Krishna Temple. Soon after rising to the top 10 or top 20 best-selling record charts throughout England, Europe, and parts of Asia, the Hare Krishna chant became a household word, especially in England, where the BBC had featured the Hare Krishna chanters, as they were then called, 4 times on the country's most popular television program, Top of the Pops. At about the same time, 5,000 miles away, several shaven-headed, saffron-robed men and sari-clad women sang along with John Lennon and Yoko Ono as they recorded the hit song, Give Peace a Chance, in their room at Montreal's Queen Elizabeth Hotel. John and Yoko, Timmy Leary, Rosemary, Tommy Smothers, Bobby Dylan, Tommy Cooper, Derek Taylor, Norman Mailer, Allen Ginsberg, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna. All we are saying is give peace a chance. The Hare Krishna devotees had been visiting with the Lennons for several days, discussing world peace and self-realization. Because of this and other widespread exposure, people all over the world soon began to identify the chanting Hare Krishna devotees as harbingers of a more simple, joyful, peaceful way of life. George Harrison was the impetus for the Beatles' spiritual quest of the 60s. And up until his death in 2001, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, continued to play a key role in his life. In this conversation with his longtime personal friend, contemporary Vedic library series editor Mukunda Goswami, taped at George's home in England on September 4, 1982, George reveals some of the memorable experiences he had chanting Hare Krishna and describes in detail his deep personal realizations about the chanting. He explains what factors led him to produce the Hare Krishna mantra record, My Sweet Lord, and the LPs, All Things Must Pass and Living in the Material World, all of which were influenced to a great extent by the Hare Krishna chanting and philosophy. He speaks lovingly and openly of his association with His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder-Ācārya of the Hare Krishna movement. George also speaks frankly about his personal philosophy regarding the Hare Krishna movement, music, yoga, reincarnation, karma, the soul, God, and Christianity. The conversation concludes with his fond remembrances of a visit to the birthplace of Lord Krishna in Vrindavan, India, home of the Hare Krishna mantra, and with George discussing some of his celebrity friends' involvement with the mantra now heard and chanted all around the world. Chanted around the world. Mukunda Goswami. Oftentimes, you speak of yourself as a plainclothes devotee, a closest yogi or closest Krishna. And millions of people all over the world have been introduced to the chanting by your songs. But what about you? How did you first come in contact with Krishna? George Harrison. Through my visits to India. So by the time the Hare Krishna movement first came to England in 1969, John and I had already gotten a hold of Prabhupada's first album, Krishna Consciousness. We had played it a lot and liked it. That was the first time I had ever heard of the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Mukunda. Even though you and John Lennon played Srila Prabhupada's record a lot and had chanted quite a bit on your own, you had never really met any of the devotees. Yet when Gurudas, Shyamsundar, and I, 3 of the 6 devotees sent from America to open the first Hare Krishna temple in London, first came to England, you co-signed the lease on our first temple in central London, bought Bhaktivedanta Manor for us, which has provided a place for literally hundreds of thousands of people to learn about Krishna consciousness, and financed the first printing of the book Krishna. You had not really known us for a very long time at all. Wasn't this a kind of a sudden change for you? George, not really, for I always felt at home with Krishna. You see, it was already a part of me. I think it is something that has been with me from my previous birth. Your coming to England and all that was just like another piece of a jigsaw puzzle that was coming together to make a complete picture. It had been slowly fitting together. That is why I responded to you all the way I did when you first came to London. Let us face it, if you are going to have to stand up and be counted, I figured I would rather be with these guys than with those other guys over there. It is like that. I mean, I would rather be one of the devotees of God than one of the straight so-called sane or normal people who just don't understand that man is a spiritual being, that he has a soul. And I felt comfortable with you all too. Kind of like we had known each other before. It was a pretty natural thing, really. Mukunda. You're a member of the Beatles, undoubtedly the greatest single pop group in music history, one that influenced not only music but whole generations of young people. After the dissolution of the group, you went on to emerge as a solo superstar with albums like All Things Must Pass. The country stopped selling albums for 7 weeks in a row, and its hit single, My Sweet Lord, which was #1 in America for 2 months, That was followed by Living in the Material World, number 1 on Billboard for 5 weeks, and a million-selling LP. One song on that album, Give Me Love, was a smash hit for 6 straight weeks. The concert for Bangladesh with Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Leon Russell, and Billy Preston was a phenomenal success. And once the LP and concert film were released, would become the single most successful rock benefit project ever. So you had material success. You had been everywhere, done everything. Yet, at the same time, you're on a spiritual quest. What was that really got you started on your spiritual journey? George. It was not until the experience of the 60s really hit. Having been successful and meeting everybody, we thought worth meeting and finding out they were not worth meeting. And having had more hit records than everybody else, and having done it bigger than everybody else. It was like reaching the top of a wall and then looking over and seeing that there is so much more on the other side. So I felt it was a part of my duty to say, oh, okay, maybe you're thinking this is all you need to be rich and famous, but actually it is not. Mukunda, in your recently published autobiography, I, Me, Mine, you said your song, Awaiting on You All, is about japa yoga, or chanting mantras and beats. You explained that a mantra is mystical energy encased in a sound structure, and that each mantra contains within its vibrations a certain power. But of all mantras, you stated that the Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra, has been prescribed as the easiest and surest way for attaining God realization in this present age. As a practitioner of japa yoga, what realization have you experienced from chanting? George. Prabhupada told me once that we should just keep chanting all the time, or as much as possible. Once you do that, you realize the benefit. The response that comes from chanting is in the form of bliss or spiritual happiness, which is a much higher taste than any happiness found here in the material world. That is why I say that the more you do it, the more you don't want to stop, because it feels so nice and peaceful. Mukunda, what is it about the mantra that brings about this feeling of peace and happiness? George, the word Hare is the word that calls upon the energy that is around the Lord. If you say the mantra enough, you build up an identification with God. God's all happiness, all bliss, and by chanting his names, we connect with him. So it is really a process of actually having a realization of God, which all becomes clear with the expanded state of consciousness that develops when you chant. Like I said in the introduction, I wrote for Prabhupada's Krishna book some years ago, if there is a God, I want to see him. It is pointless to believe in something without proof. And Krishna consciousness and meditation are methods where you can actually obtain God perception. Mukunda, is it an instantaneous process or gradual? George, you don't get it in 5 minutes. It is something that takes time. But it works because it is a direct process of attaining God and will help us to have pure consciousness and good perception that is above the normal everyday state of consciousness. Mukunda, how do you feel after chanting for a long time? George, in the life I lead, I find that I sometimes have opportunities when I can really get going at it. And the more I do it, I find the harder it is to stop. And I don't want to lose the feeling it gives me. For example, once I chanted the Hare Krishna mantra non-stop all the way from France to Portugal. I drove for about 23 hours and chanted all the way. It gets you feeling a bit invincible. The funny thing was that I didn't even know where I was going. I mean, I had bought a map and I knew basically which way I was aiming, but I couldn't speak French, Spanish, or Portuguese. But none of that seemed to matter. Once you get chanting, then things start to happen transcendentally. Mukunda, the Vedas inform us that because God is absolute, there is no difference between God, the person, and his holy name. The name is God. When you first started chanting, could you perceive that? George. It takes a certain amount of time and faith to accept or realize that there is no difference between him and his name. To get to the point where you are no longer mystified by where he is. Like, is he around here? You realize after some time, here he is, right here. It's a matter of practice. So when I say that I see God, I don't necessarily mean to say that when I chant, I am seeing Krishna in his original form, when he came 5,000 years ago, dancing across the river, playing his flute. Of course, that would also be nice, and it is quite possible too. When you become real pure by chanting, you can actually see God like that. I mean, personally. But no doubt you can feel his presence and know that he is there when you are chanting. Mukunda, can you think of an incident where you felt God's presence very strongly through chanting? George, once I was on an aeroplane that was in an electric storm. It was hit by lightning 3 times, and a Boeing 707 went over the top of us, missing us by inches. I thought the back end of the plane had blown off. I was on my way from Los Angeles to New York to organize the Bangladesh concert. As soon as the plane began bouncing around, I started chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The whole thing went on for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. The plane dropping hundreds of feet and bouncing all over in the storm, all the lights out and all these explosions, and everybody terrified. I ended up with my feet pressed against the seat in front, my seat belt as tight as it could be, gripping on the thing, and yelling Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare at the top of my voice. I know for me, the difference between making it and not making it was actually chanting the mantra. Peter Sellers was also so that chanting Hare Krishna saved him from a plane crash once. Jan Lanan and Hare Krishna. Mukunda. Did any of the other Beatles chant? George. Before meeting Prabhupada and all of you, I had bought that album Prabhupada did in New York, and John and I listened to it. I remember we sang it for days, John and I, with ukulele, banjos, sailing through the Greek islands chanting Hare Krishna. Like 6 hours we sang, because we couldn't stop once we got going. As soon as we stopped, it was like the lights went out. It went on to the point where our jaws were aching, singing the mantra over and over and over and over and over. We felt exalted. It was a very happy time for us. Mukunda. I saw a video the other day sent to us from Canada showing John and Yoko Ono recording their hit song, Give Peace a Chance. And about 5 or 6 of the devotees were there in John's room at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, singing along and playing cymbals and drums. John and Yoko chanted Hare Krishna on that song. That was in May of 69. And just 3 months later, Srila Prabhupada was John and Yoko's house guest for 1 month at their estate outside London. While Prabhupada was there, you, John, and Yoko came to his room one afternoon for a few hours. I think that was the first time you all met him. George, that's right. Mukunda, at that point, John was a spiritual seeker, and Prabhupada explained the true path to peace and liberation. He talked about karma, reincarnation, and the eternality of the soul, which are all elaborately dealt with in the Vedic literatures. Although John never made Hare Krishna a big part of his life, he echoed the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in a hit song he wrote just about a year after that conversation, Instant Karma. Now, what is the difference between chanting Hare Krishna and meditation? George. It is really the same sort of thing as meditation, but I think it has a quicker effect. I mean, even if you put your beats down, you can still say the mantra or sing it without actually keeping track on your beats. One of the main differences between silent meditation and chanting is that silent meditation is rather dependent on concentration. But when you chant, it is more of a direct connection with God. Practical meditation. Mukunda. The Maha Mantra was prescribed for modern times because of the fast-paced nature of things today. Even when people do get in into a little quiet place, it is very difficult to calm the mind for very long. George, that's right. Chanting Hare Krishna is a type of meditation that can be practiced even if the mind is in turbulence. You can even be doing it and other things at the same time. That is what is so nice. In my life, there has been many times the mantra brought things around. It keeps me in tune with reality. And the more you sit in one place and chant, the more incense you offer to Krishna in the same room, the more you purify the vibration, the more you can achieve what you are trying to do, which is just trying to remember God, 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 God as often as possible. And if you are talking to him with the mantra, it certainly helps. Mukunda, what else helps you to fix your mind on God? George, well, just having as many things around me that will remind me of him, like incense and pictures. Just the other day, I was looking at a small picture on the wall of my studio of you, Gurudas and Shyam Sundar, and just seeing all the old devotees made me think of Krishna. I guess that is the business of devotees, to make you think of God. Mukunda, how often do you chant? George, whenever I get a chance. Mukunda, once you asked to Srila Prabhupada about a particular verse he quoted from the Vedas, in which it is said that when one chants the holy name of Krishna, Krishna dances on the tongue, and one wishes one had thousands of years and thousands of mouths with which to better appreciate the holy names of God. George, yes. I think he was talking about the realization that there is no difference between him standing before you and his being present in his name. That is the real beauty of chanting. You directly connect with God. I have no doubt that by saying Krishna over and over again, he can come and dance on the tongue. The main thing, though, is to keep in touch with God. Mukunda, so your habit is generally to use the beads when you chant? George, oh yeah, I have my beads. I remember when I first got them, they were just big knobby globs of wood. But now I'm very glad to say that they are smooth from chanting a lot. Mukunda, do you generally keep them in the bag when you chant? George, yes. I find it very good to be touching them. It keeps another one of the senses fixed on God. Beads really help in that respect. You know, the frustrating thing about it was in the beginning, there was a period when I was heavy into chanting and I had my hand in my bead bag all the time. And I got so tired of people asking me, did you hurt your hand, break it or something? In the end, I used to say, yeah, I had an accident, because it was easier than explaining everything. Using the beads also helps me to release a lot of nervous energy. Mukunda, some people say that if everyone on the planet chanted Hare Krishna, they wouldn't be able to keep their minds on what they were doing. In other words, some people ask that if everyone started chanting, wouldn't the whole world just grind to a halt? They wonder if people would stop working in factories, for example. George, no, chanting does not stop you from being creative or productive. It actually helps you concentrate. I think this would make a great sketch for television. Imagine all the workers on the food assembly line in Detroit, all of them chanting Hare Krishna while bolting on the wheels. Now that would be wonderful. It might help out the auto industry, and probably there would be more decent cars too. Experiencing God through the senses. Mukunda, we have talked a lot about japa, or personalized chanting, which most chanters engage in. But there is another type called kirtan, when one chants congregationally in a temple or on the street with a group of devotees. Kirtana generally gives a more supercharged effect, like recharging one's spiritual batteries, and it gives others a chance to hear the holy names and become purified. Actually, I was with Srila Prabhupada when he first began the group chanting in Tompkins Square Park on New York's Lower East Side in 1966. The poet Allen Ginsberg would come and chant with us a lot and would play his harmonium. A lot of people would come to hear the chanting. Then Prabhupada would give lectures on the Bhagavad Gita back at the temple. George, yes. Going to a temple or chanting with a group of other people, the vibration is that much stronger. Of course, for some people, it is easy just to start chanting on their beats in the middle of a crowd, while other people are more comfortable chanting in the temple. But part of Krishna consciousness is trying to tune in all the senses of all the people to experience God through all the senses, not just by experiencing Him on Sunday, through your knees by kneeling on some hard wooden kneeler in the church. But if you visit a temple, you can see pictures of God. You can say the deity form of the Lord, and you can just hear Him by listening to yourself and others say the mantra. It is just a way of realizing that all the senses can be applied to perceiving God. And it makes it that much more appealing, seeing the pictures, hearing the mantra, smelling the incense, flowers, and so on. That is the nice thing about your movement. It incorporates everything: chanting, dancing, philosophy, and prasad, vegetarian food that has been spiritualized by being offered to Lord Krishna. The music and dancing is a serious part of the process too. It is not just something to burn off excess energy. Mukunda, we have always seen that when we chant in the streets, people are eager to crowd around and listen. A lot of them tap their feet or dance along. Georgie, it is great. The sound of the cymbals. When I hear them from a few blocks away, it's like some magical thing that awakens something in me. Without their really being aware of what is happening, people are being awakened spiritually. Of course, in another sense, in a higher sense, the kirtan is always going on, whether we are hearing it or not. Now, all over the place in Western cities, the Sankirtan party has become a common sight. I love to see these Sankirtan parties because I love the whole idea of the devotees mixing it up with everybody, giving everybody a chance to remember. I wrote in the Krishna book introduction, everybody is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. Krishna is God. And by chanting His holy names, the devotee quickly develops God consciousness. Mukunda, Srila Prabhupada often said that after a large number of temples were established, most people would simply begin to take up the chanting of Hare Krishna in their own homes. And we are seeing more and more of that. This is what is happening. Our worldwide congregation is very large, in the millions. The chanting on the streets, the books, and the temples are there to give people a start, to introduce them to the process. George, I think it is better that it is spreading into the homes now. There are a lot of closest Krishnas, There is a lot of people out there who are just waiting. And if it is not today, it will be tomorrow or next week or next year. Back in the 60s, whatever we are all getting into, we tended to broadcast it as loud as we could. I had certain realizations and went through a period where I was so thrilled about my discoveries and realizations that I wanted to shout and tell it to everybody. But there is a time to shout it out and a time not to shout it out. A lot of people went underground with their spiritual life in the 70s. But they're out there in little nooks and crannies and in the countryside. People who look and dress straight, insurance salesman types, but they're really meditators and chanters, closest devotees. Prabhupada's movement is doing pretty well. It is growing like wildfire, really. How long it will take until we get to a golden age where everybody is perfectly in tune with God's will, I don't know. But because of Prabhupada, Krishna consciousness has certainly spread more in the last 16 years than it has since the 16th century, the time of Lord Chaitanya. The mantra has spread more quickly, and the movement has gotten bigger and bigger. It would be great if everyone chanted. Everybody would benefit by doing it. No matter how much money you have got, it does not necessarily make you happy. You have to find your happiness with the problems you have, not worry too much about them, and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. The great saint, mystic, and incarnation of Krishna who popularized the chanting of Hare Krishna and founded the modern day Hare Krishna movement. The Hare Krishna record. Mukunda. In 1969, you produced a single called Hare Krishna Mantra, which eventually became a hit in many countries. That tune later became a cut on the Radha Krishna Temple album, which also produced on the Apple label and which was distributed in America by Capitol Records. A lot of people in the recording business were surprised by this. You are producing songs for and singing with the Hare Krishnas. Why did you do it? George: well, it's just all a part of service, isn't it? Spiritual service. In order to try to spread the mantra all over the world. Also to try and give the devotees a wider base and a bigger foothold in England and everywhere else. Mukunda: how did the success of this record of Hare Krishna devotees chanting compare with some of the rock musicians you were producing at the time, like Jackie Lomax, Splinter, and Billy Preston? George: it was a different thing. Nothing to do with that really. There was much more reason to do it. There was less commercial potential in it, but it was much more satisfying to do, knowing the possibilities that it was going to create the connotations it would have just by doing a 3.5-minute mantra. That was more fun, really, than trying to make a pop hit record. It was the feeling of trying to utilize your skills or job to make it into some spiritual service to Krishna. Mukunda: what effect do you think that tune, Hare Krishna mantra, having reached millions and millions of people, has had on the world's cosmic consciousness? George: I would like to think it had some effect. After all, the sound is God. Mukunda: when Apple called a press conference to promote the record, the media seemed shocked to hear you speak about the soul and God being so important. George: I felt it was important to try and be precise, to tell them and let them know. To come out of the closest and really tell them. To come out of the closet and really tell them. Because once you realize something, then you can't pretend you don't know it anymore. I figured this is the space age with airplanes and everything. If everyone can go around the world on their holidays, there is no reason why a mantra can't go a few miles as well. So the idea was to try to spiritually infiltrate society, so to speak. After I got Apple Records committed to you and the record release, and after our big promotion, we saw it was going to become a hit. And one of the greatest thrills of my life, actually, was seeing you all on BBC's Top of the Pops. I couldn't believe it. It is pretty hard to get on that program because they only put you on if you come into the top 20. It was just like a breath of fresh air. My strategy was to keep it to a 3.5-minute version of the mantra so they would play it on the radio, and it worked. I did the harmonium and guitar track for that record, and Abbey Road Studios before one of the Beatles sessions, and then overdubbed a bass part. I remembered Paul McCartney and his wife Linda arrived at the studio and enjoyed the mantra. Mukunda: Paul is quite favorable now, George: that's good. It still sounds like quite a good recording, even after all these years. The greatest fun of all, really, to see Krishna on Top of the Pops. Mukunda: shortly after its release, John Lennon told me that they played it at the intermission right before Bob Dylan did the Isle of Wight concert with Jimi Hendrix, the Moody Blues, and Joe Cocker in the summer of 1969. George: they played it while they were getting the stage set up for Bob. It was great. Besides, it was a catchy tune, and the people didn't have to know what it meant in order to enjoy it. I felt very good when I first heard it was doing well. Mukunda: how did you feel about the record technically, the voices? George: Yamuna, the lead singer, has a naturally good voice. I liked the way she sang with conviction, and she sang like she had been singing it a lot before. It didn't sound like the first tune she had ever sung. I used to sing the mantra long before I met any other devotees or long before I met Prabhupada, because I had his first record then for at least 2 years. When you are open to something, it is like being a beacon, and you attract it. From the first time I heard the chanting, it was like a door opened somewhere in my subconscious, maybe from some previous life. Mukunda: In the lyrics to the song, awaiting on you all, from all things must pass, you come right out front and tell people that they can be free from living in the material world by chanting the names of God. What made you do it? What kind of feedback did you get? George. At that time, nobody was committed to that type of music in the pop world. I felt, a real need for that. So rather than sitting and waiting for somebody else, I decided to do it myself. A lot of times we think, well, I agree with you, but I'm not going to actually stand up and be counted. Too risky. Everybody's always trying to keep themselves covered, stay commercial. So I thought, just do it. Nobody else is, and I'm sick of all these young people just boogieing around, wasting their lives, Also, I felt that there were a lot of people out there who would be reached. I still get letters from people saying, I've been in the Krishna temple for 3 years, and I would have never known about Krishna unless you recorded the All Things Must Pass album. So I know by the Lord's grace, I'm a small part in the cosmic play. Mukunda, what about the other Beatles? What did they think about your taking up Krishna consciousness? What was their reaction? You had all been to India by then and were pretty much searching for something spiritual. Shyamsundara said that once, when he had lunch with you and the other Beatles, they were all quite respectful. George. Oh yeah, well, if the Fab Four didn't get it, that is, if they couldn't deal with shaven-headed Hare Krishnas, then there would have been no hope. Laughter. And the devotees just came to be associated with me, so people stopped thinking, hey, what is this? If somebody in orange with a shaved head would appear, they would say, oh yeah, they were with George. Mukunda, from the very start, you always felt comfortable around the devotees? George, the first time I met Shyamsundara, I liked him. He was my pal. On the back of Prabhupada's record, I would read about Prabhupada coming from India to Boston, and I knew that Shyamsundara and all of you were in my age group. And the only difference really was that you already joined and I hadn't. I was in a rock band, but I didn't have any fear because I had seen dhotis through your robes and the saffron color and shaved heads in India. Krishna consciousness was especially good for me because I didn't get the feeling that I would have to shave my head, move into a temple, and do it full time. So it was a spiritual thing that just fit in with my lifestyle. I could still be a musician, but I just changed my consciousness, that's all. Kunda. The Tudor mansion and estate that you gave us outside London has become one of our largest international centers. How do you feel about the Bhaktivedanta Manor's success in spreading Krishna consciousness? George, oh, it's great. And it also relates to making the Hare Krishna record or whatever my involvements were. Actually, it gives me pleasure. The idea that I was fortunate enough to be able to help at that time. All those songs with spiritual themes were like little plugs. My Sweet Lord and the others. And now I know that people are much more respectful and accepting when it comes to seeing the devotees in the streets and all that. It's no longer like something that is coming from left field. And I have given a lot of Prabhupada's books to many people. And whether I ever hear from them again or not, it is good to know that they have gotten them. And if they read them, their lives may be changed. Mukunda, when you come across people who are spiritually inclined but don't have much knowledge, what kind of advice do you give them? George, I try to tell them my little bit, what my experience is, and give them a choice of things to read and a choice of places to go. Like, go to the temple, try chanting. Mukunda, in the Ballad of John and Yoko wrapped the media for the way it can foster a false image of you and perpetuate it. It has taken a lot of time and effort to get them to understand that we are a genuine religion with scriptures that predate the New Testament by 3,000 years. Gradually, though, more people, scholars, philosophers, theologians have come around, and today they have a great deal of respect for the ancient Vaishnava tradition. The spiritual culture centered on loving devotional service to Lord Vishnu or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where the modern day Krishna consciousness movement has its root. George, the media is to blame for everything, for all the misconceptions about the movement. But in a sense, it did not really matter if they said something good or bad, because Krishna consciousness always seemed to transcend that barrier anyway. The fact that the media was letting people know about Krishna was good in itself. Mukunda. Srila Prabhupada always trained us to stick to our principles. He said that the worst thing we could ever do would be to make some sort of compromise or to dilute the philosophy for the sake of cheap popularity. Although many Swamis and Yogis had come from India to the West, Prabhupada was the only one with the purity and devotion to establish India's ancient Krishna conscious philosophy around the world on its own terms, not watered down, but as it is. George, that's right. He was a perfect example of what he preached. Mukunda, how did you feel about financing the first printing of the Krishna book and writing the introduction? George, just felt, I just felt like it was part of my job, Wherever I go in the world, when I see devotees, I always say Hare Krishna to them, and they're always pleased to see me. It is a nice relationship. Whether they really know me personally or not, they feel they know me, and they do really. When you did the Material World album, you used a photo insert taken from the cover of Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita showing Krishna and his friend and disciple Arjuna. Why? Judge, oh yeah, it said on the album from the cover of Bhagavad Gita as it is by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. It was a promo for you, of course. I wanted to give them all a chance to see Krishna, to know about him. I mean, that is the whole idea, isn't it? Spiritual food. Mukunda. At lunch today, we spoke a little about prasad, vegetarian food that has been spiritualized by being offered to Krishna in the temple. A lot of people have come to Krishna consciousness through prasad, especially through our Sunday feast at all our centers around the world. I mean, this process is the only kind of yoga that you can actually practice by eating. Judge, well, we should try to see God in everything. So it helps so much having the food to taste. Let's face it, if God is in everything, why shouldn't you taste him when you eat? I think that prasad is a very important thing. Krishna is God, and so he is absolute. His name, his form, prasad, it's all him. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So if you can get to a man's spirit soul by eating, and it works, why not do it? There is nothing better than having been chanting and dancing, or just sitting and talking philosophy, and then suddenly the devotees bringing out prasad. It is a blessing from Krishna, and it is spiritually important. The idea is that prasad is the sacrament the Christians talk about. Only instead of being just a wafer, it's a whole feast, really. And the taste is so nice. It is out of this world. And prasad is a good little hook in this age of commercialism. When people want something extra, or they need to have something special, prasad will hook them in there. It has undoubtedly done a great deal toward getting a lot more people involved in spiritual life. It breaks down prejudices too. Because they think, oh, well, yes, I wouldn't mind a drink of whatever, a bite of that. Then they ask, what is this? And, oh, well, it is prasad. And they get to learn another aspect of Krishna consciousness. Then they say, it actually tastes quite nice. Have you got another plateful? I have seen that happen with lots of people, especially older people I have seen at your temples. Maybe they are a little bit prejudiced, but the next thing you know, they are in love with prasad. And eventually they walk out of the temple thinking, they're not so bad after all. Mukunda. The Vedic literatures reveal that prasad conveys spiritual realization, just as chanting does, but in a less obvious or conspicuous way. You make spiritual advancement just by eating it. George, I would say from my experience that it definitely works. I have always enjoyed prasad much more when I have been at the temple or when I have actually been sitting with Prabhupada than when somebody has brought it to me. Sometimes you can sit there with prasad and find that 3 or 4 hours have gone by and you didn't even know You didn't even know it. Prasad really helped me a lot because you start to realize now I am tasting Krishna. You are conscious suddenly of another aspect of God, understanding that He is this little samosa. It is all just a matter of tuning in to the spirit, into the spiritual. And prasad is a very real part of it all. Mukunda, a lot of the rock groups like the Grateful Dead and Police get prasad backstage before their concerts. They love it. It is a long-standing tradition with us. I remember one time sending prasad to one of the Beatles recording sessions. And your sister was telling me today that while you were doing the Bangladesh concert, Shyam Sundara used to bring you all prasad at the rehearsals. George, yes. He has even got a credit on the album sleeve. Mukunda, what are your favorite kinds of prasad, George? George, I really like those deep-fried cauliflower things. Pakoras? Mukunda, yes. George, and one thing I always liked was rasamalai. And there is a lot of good drinks as well, fruit juices and lassi. Mukunda, do you remember the time we called the press in London for a big feast when we were promoting the Hare Krishna Mantra record? They were pretty surprised, for no one really knew us then for our food. Now pretty much when people think about us, they still think they are the ones chanting and dancing in the streets, but they are connecting us more and more now with prasad. They are the ones with those free vegetarian dinners. George, the press was probably thinking, oh, we have got to go and do this now. And then suddenly they find that they're all sitting around and eating a much better Indian takeaway than they would ever have at any one of the local spots. They were pretty impressed. Mukunda, we have served about 150 million plates of prasad so far at the free feasts around the world. What to speak of our restaurants? George, you ought to have it up outside on billboards like those hamburger places do. Like 150 million served. I think it is great. It's a pity you don't have restaurants or temples on all the main streets of every little town and village, like those hamburger and fried chicken places. You should put them out of business. Mukunda, you have been to our London restaurant, Healthy, Wealthy and Wise? George, lots of times. It's good to have these and other restaurants around, where plainclothes devotees serve the food. People slowly realize this is one of the best places I have been, and they keep coming back. Then maybe they pick up a little bit of literature or a pamphlet there and say, oh, hey, that was run by the Hare Krishnas. I think there is a lot of values also to that kind of more subtle approach. Healthy, Wealthy and Wise has proper foods, good balanced stuff, and it is fresh. Even more important, it is made with an attitude of devotion, which means a lot. When someone has begrudgingly cooked something, it doesn't taste as nice as when someone has done it to try and please God, to offer it to Him first. Just that in itself makes all the food taste so much better, so much nicer. Mukunda, Paul and Linda McCartney have prasad frequently from Healthy, Wealthy and Wise. Not long ago, Paul met a devotee near his London studio and wrote a song about it. In an interview with James Johnson in a London paper, he said, one song, one of these days, is about when I met someone on the way to the studio who was a Hare Krishna, and we got talking about lifestyles and so forth. I'm not a Hare Krishna myself, but I'm very sympathetic. You have been a vegetarian for years, George. Have you had any difficulties maintaining it? George, actually, I wised up and made sure I had dal, bean soup, and something every day. Actually, lentils are one of the cheapest things, but they give you A1 protein. People are simply screwing up when they go out and buy beef steak, which is killing them with cancer and heart troubles. The stuff costs a fortune too. You could feed 1,000 people with lentil soup for the cost of half a dozen fillets. Does that make sense? Mukunda. One of the things that really has a profound effect on people when they visit temples or read our books is the paintings and sculptures done by our devotee artists of scenes from Krishna's pastimes. when he appeared on earth 5,000 years ago. Prabhupada once said that these paintings were windows to the spiritual world, and he organized an art academy, training his disciples in the techniques for creating transcendental art. Now, tens of thousands of people have these paintings hanging in their homes, either as originals, lithographs, canvas prints, or posters. You have been to our multimedia Bhagavad Gita museum in Los Angeles. What kind of an effect did it have on you? I thought it was great. Better than Disneyland, really. I mean, it is as valuable as that or the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. The sculpted dioramas look great, and the music is nice. It gives people a real feeling for what the kingdom of God must be like. And much more basic than that, it shows in a way that it is easy for even a child to understand exactly how the body is different from the soul and how the soul is the important thing. I always have pictures around like the one of Krishna on the chariot that I put in the material world album. And I have the sculpted Shiva fountain the devotees made for me in my garden. Pictures are helpful when I am chanting. You know that painting in the Bhagavad Gita, the super soul in the heart of the dog, the cow, the elephant, the poor man, and the priest? That is very good to help you realize that Krishna is dwelling in the hearts of everybody. It doesn't matter what kind of body you have got, the Lord is there with you. We're all the same, really. After seeing dioramas at the Los Angeles Bhagavad Gita Museum, George asked if the artists and sculptors who had produced the museum could sculpt a life-size fountain of Lord Shiva, one of the principal Hindu demigods and a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Lord Shiva in a meditative pose, complete with a stream of water sprouting from his head, soon resided in the gardens of George's estate, heralded as among the most beautiful in all of England. Meeting Srila Prabhupada. Mukunda, George, you and John Lennon met Srila Prabhupada together when he stayed at John's home in September of 1969. George, yes. But when I met him at first, I underestimated him. I didn't realize it then. But I see now that because of him, the mantra has spread so far in the last 16 years, more than it had in the last 5 centuries. Now that is pretty amazing because he was getting older and older. Yet he was writing his books all the time. I realized later on that he was much more incredible than what you could see on the surface. Mukunda, what about him stands out the most in your mind? George, the thing that always stays in is his saying, I am the servant of the servant of the servant. I like that. A lot of people say, I am it, I am the divine incarnation, I am here and let me hip you. You know what I mean? But Prabhupada was never like that. I like Prabhupada's humbleness. I always liked his humility and his simplicity. The servant of the servant of the servant is really what it is, you know. None of us are God, just his servants. He just made me feel so comfortable. I always felt very relaxed with him, and I felt more like a friend. I felt that he was a good friend, even though he was at the time 73 years old, working practically all through the night, day after day, with very little sleep. He still didn't come through to me as though he was a very highly educated intellectual being, because he had a sort of childlike simplicity, which is great, fantastic. Even though he was the greatest Sanskrit scholar and a saint, I appreciated the fact that he never made me feel uncomfortable. In fact, he always went out of his way to make me feel comfortable. I always thought of him as sort of a lovely friend, really. And now he's still a lovely friend. Mukunda. In one of his books, Prabhupada said that your sincere service was better than some people who had delved or more deeply into Krishna consciousness but could not maintain that level of commitment. How did you feel about that? George, very wonderful, really. I mean, it really gave me hope. Because as they say, even one moment in the company of a divine person, Krishna's pure devotee, can help a tremendous amount. And I think Prabhupada was really pleased at the idea that somebody from outside the temple was helping to get the album made. Just the fact that he was pleased was encouraging to me. I knew he liked the Hare Krishna mantra record, and he asked the devotees to play that song Govinda. They still play, don't they? Mukunda. Every temple has a recording of it. And we play it each morning when the devotees assemble before the altar, before Kirtan. It is an ISKCON institution, you might say. George. And if I didn't get feedback from Prabhupada on my songs about Krishna or the philosophy, I would get it from the devotees. That's all the encouragement I needed, really. It just seemed that anything spiritual I did, either through songs or helping with publishing the books or whatever, really pleased him. My song, Living in the Material World, as I wrote in I, Me, Mine, was influenced by Srila Prabhupada. He's the one who explained to me that how we are not these physical bodies. We just happen to be in them. Like I said in the song, this place is not really what is happening. We don't belong here, but in the spiritual sky. As I am fated for the material world, we are frustrated in the material world, senses never gratified, only swelling like a tide that could drown me in the material world. The whole point is being there, is being here, really, is to figure a way to get out. That was the thing about Prabhupada. You see, he didn't just talk about loving Krishna and getting out of this place. He was the perfect example. He talked about always chanting, and he was always chanting. I think that in itself was perhaps the most encouraging thing for me. It was enough to make me try harder, to be just a little bit better. He was a perfect example of everything he preached. Mukunda, how would you describe Srila Prabhupada's achievements? George, I think Prabhupada's accomplishments are very significant. They are huge, even compared to someone like William Shakespeare. The amount of literature Prabhupada produced is truly amazing. It boggles the mind. He sometimes went for days with only a few hours sleep. I mean, even a youthful, athletic young person couldn't keep the pace he kept up at 79 years of age. Srila Prabhupada had already had an amazing effect on the world. There is no way of measuring it. One day I just realized, God, this man is amazing. He would sit up all night translating Sanskrit into English, putting in glossaries to make sure everyone understands it. And yet, he never came off as someone above you. He always had that childlike simplicity. And what is most amazing is the fact that he did all this translating in such a relatively short time, just a few years. And without having anything more than his own Krishna consciousness, he rounded up all these thousands of devotees, set the whole movement in motion, which became something so strong that it went on even after he passed away in 1977. And it is still escalating, even now, at an incredible rate. It will go on and on from the knowledge he gave. It can only grow and grow. The more people wake up spiritually, the more they will begin to realize the depth of what Prabhupada was saying, how much he gave. Mukunda, did you know that complete sets of Prabhupada's books are in all the major colleges and universities in the world, including Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge, and the Sorbonne? George, they should be. One of the greatest things I noticed about Prabhupada was the way he would be talking to you in English. And then all of a sudden, he would say it to you in Sanskrit and then translate it back into English. It was clear that he really knew it well. His contribution has obviously been enormous from the literary point of view because he has brought the Supreme Person Krishna more into focus. A lot of scholars and writers know the Gita, but only on an intellectual level. Even when they write, Krishna said, they don't do it with bhakti or love required. That is the secret. You know, Krishna is actually a person who is the Lord and who will also appear there in that book when there is that love, that bhakti. You can't understand the first thing about God unless you love him. These big so-called Vedic scholars, they don't necessarily love Krishna. So they can't understand him and give him to us. But Prabhupada was different. Mukunda. The Vedic literatures predicted that after the advent of Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago, there would be a golden age of 10,000 years, when the chanting of the holy names of God would completely nullify all the degradations of the modern age, and real spiritual peace would come to this planet. George, well, Prabhupada has definitely affected the world in an absolute way. What he was giving us was the highest literature, the highest knowledge. I mean, there just is not anything higher. Mukunda, you write in your autobiography that no matter how good you are, you still need grace to get out of the material world. You can be a yogi or a monk or a nun, but without God's grace, you still can't make it. And at the end of the song, Living in the Material World, the lyrics say, got to get out of this place by the Lord Sri Krishna's grace, my salvation from the material world. If we were dependent on the grace of God, what does the expression, God helps those who help themselves mean? George, it is flexible, I think. In one way, I'm never going to get out of here unless it is by His grace. But then again, His grace is relative to the amount of desire I can manifest in myself. The amount of grace I would expect from God should be equal to the amount of grace I can gather or earn. I get out what I put in. Like in the song I wrote about Prabhupada. The Lord loves the one that loves the Lord. And the law says if you don't give, then you don't get loving. Now the Lord helps those that help themselves. And the law says whatever you do is going to come right back on you. The Lord loves the one that loves the Lord from living in the material world. Have you heard that song, That Which I Have Lost, from a new album, somewhere in England? It is right out of the Bhagavad Gita. In it, I talk about fighting the forces of darkness, limitations, falsehood, and morality. God is a person. Mukunda, yes, I like it. If people can understand the Lord's message in the Bhagavad Gita, they can become truly happy. A lot of people, when they just get started in spiritual life, worship God as impersonal. What is the difference between worshiping Krishna or God in his personal form and worshiping his impersonal nature or energy or light? George, it is like the difference between hanging out with a computer or hanging out with a person. Like I said earlier, if there is a God, I want to see him. Not only his energy or his light, but him. Mukunda, what do you think is the goal of human life? George, each individual has to burn out his own karma and escape from the chains of Maya, illusory energy, reincarnation, and all that. The best thing anyone can give to humanity is God consciousness. Then you can really give them something. But first, you have to concentrate on your own spiritual advancement. So in a sense, we have to become selfish to become selfless. Mukunda, what about trying to solve the problems of life without employing the spiritual process? Yeah, the life is like a piece of string with a lot of knots tied in it. The knots are the karma you are born with from all your past lives. And the object of human life is to try and undo all those knots. That's what chanting and meditation in God consciousness can do. Otherwise, you simply tie another 10 knots each time you try to undo one knot. That is how karma works. I mean, we are now the results of our past actions. And in the future, we will be the results of the actions we are performing now. A little understanding of as you sow, so shall you reap is important because then you can't blame the condition you are in on anyone else. You know that it is by your own actions you are able to get more in a mess or out of one. It is your own actions that relieve or bind you. Mukunda, in Srimad Bhagavatam, the crest jewel of all the Vedic literatures, it is described how those pure souls who live in the spiritual world with God have different types of rasas or relationships with Him. Is there any special way you like to think of Krishna? George, I like the idea of seeing Krishna as a baby. the way he has often depicted in India, and also Govinda, the cowherd boy. I like the idea that you can have Krishna as a baby and feel protective of him, or as your friend, or as the guru or a master type figure. My sweet Lord. Mukunda. I don't think it is possible to calculate just how many people were turned on to Krishna consciousness by your song, My Sweet Lord. But you went through quite a personal thing before you decided to do that song. In your book, you write, I thought a lot about whether to do My Sweet Lord or not, because I would be committing myself publicly. Many people fear the words Lord and God. I was sticking my neck out on the chopping block, but at the same time I thought, nobody's saying it, why should I be untrue to myself? I came to believe in the importance that if you feel something strong enough, then you should say it. I wanted to show that Hallelujah and Hare Krishna are quite the same thing. I did the voices singing Hallelujah and then changed to Hare Krishna so that people would be chanting the Maha Mantra before they knew what was going on. I had been chanting Hare Krishna for a long time, and this song was a simple idea of how to do a Western pop equivalent of a mantra which repeats over and over again the holy names. I don't feel guilty or bad about it. In fact, it saved many a heroin addict's life. In fact, it saved many a heroin addict's life. Why do you feel you wanted to put Hare Krishna on the album at all? Wouldn't Hallelujah alone have been good enough? George. Well, first of all, Hallelujah is a joyous expression the Christians have. But Hare Krishna has a mystical side to it. It is more than just glorifying God. It is asking to become his servant. And because of the way the mantra is put together, with the mystical spiritual energy contained in those syllables, it is much closer to God than the way Christianity currently seems to be representing him. Although Christ in my mind is an absolute yogi, I think many Christian teachers today are misrepresenting Christ. They are supposed to be representing Jesus, but they are not doing it very well. They are letting him down very badly, and that's a big turnoff. My idea in My Sweet Lord, because it sounded like a pop song, was to sneak up on them a bit. The point was to have the people not offended by Hallelujah, and by the time it gets to Hare Krishna, they're already hooked, and their feet are tapping, and they're already singing Hallelujah, to kind of lull them into a sense of false security. And then suddenly it turns into Hare Krishna, and they will all be singing that before they know what has happened. And they will think, hey, I thought I was not supposed to like Hare Krishna. People write to me even now asking what style that was. 10 years later, they are still trying to figure out what the words mean. It was just a little trick, really, and it did not offend. For some reason, I never got any offensive feedback from Christians who said, we like it up to a point, but what is all this about Hare Krishna? Hallelujah may have originally been some mantric thing that got watered down, but I am not sure what really means. The Greek word for Christ is Christos, which is, let's face it, Krishna and Christos is the same name actually. Mukunda, what would you say is the difference between Christian view of God and Krishna as represented in the Bhagavad Gita? George, when I first came to this house, it was occupied by nuns. I brought in this poster of Vishnu. You just see his head and shoulders and his forearms holding a conch shell and various other symbols. And it has a big Om written above it. He has a nice aura around him. I left it by the fireplace and went out into the garden. When we came back into the house, they all pounced on me saying, who is that? What is that? As if it was some pagan god. So I said, well, if God is unlimited, then he can appear in any form, whichever way he likes to appear. That's one way he is called Vishnu. It sort of freaked them out a bit. But the point is, why should God be limited? Even if you get him as Krishna, he is not limited to that picture of Krishna. He can be the baby form, he can be Govinda, and he can manifest in so many other well-known forms. You can see Krishna as a little boy, which is how I like to see Krishna. It is a joyful relationship. But there is this morbid side to the way many represent Christianity today, where you don't smile because it is too serious and you can't expect to see God, that kind of stuff. If there is God, we must see him. And I don't believe in the idea you find in most churches, where they say, no, you are not going to see him. He's way up above you. Just believe what we tell you and shut up. I mean, the knowledge that is given in Prabhupada's book, the Vedic stuff, that is the world's oldest scriptures. They say that man can become purified and with divine vision, he can see God. You get pure by chanting, then you see him. And Sanskrit, the language they are written in, is the world's first recorded language. Devanagari, the Sanskrit alphabet, actually means language of the gods. Mukunda. Anyone who is sincere about making spiritual advancement, whatever one's religion may be, can usually see the value of chanting. I mean, if that person is really trying to be God conscious and trying to chant sincerely. John, that's right. It's a matter of being open. Anyone who is open can do it. You just have to be open and not prejudiced. You just have to try it. There is no loss, but the intellectuals will always have problems because they always need to know. They're often the most spiritually bankrupt people because they never let go. They don't understand the meaning of to transcend the intellect. But an ordinary person is more willing to say, okay, let me try it and see how it works. Let me try and see if it works. Chanting Hare Krishna can make a person better, Christian too. Karma and reincarnation. Mukunda. In I, Me, Mine, you speak about karma and reincarnation and how the only way to get out of the cycle is to take up a bona fide spiritual process. You say at one point, everybody is worried about dying, but the cause of death is birth. So if you don't want to die, you don't get born. Did any of the other Beatles believe in reincarnation? George, I am sure John does, and I wouldn't want to underestimate Paul and Ringo. I wouldn't be surprised if they are hoping it's true. You know what I mean? For all I know, Ringo might be a yogi disguised as a drummer. Mukunda. Paul had our latest book coming back, The Science of Reincarnation. Where do you think John's soul is now? George, I should hope that he is in a good place. He had the understanding, though, that each soul reincarnates until it becomes completely pure, and that each soul finds its own level, designated by reaction to its actions in this and previous lives. Mukunda. Bob Dylan did a lot of chanting at one time. He used to come to Los Angeles temple and came to the Denver and Chicago temples as well. In fact, he drove across the United States with 2 devotees once and wrote several songs about Krishna. They spent a lot of time chanting. George, that's right. He said he enjoyed the chanting and being with them. Also, Stevie Wonder had you on one of his records, and it was great. The song he put the chanting in, Pastimes Paradise. Mukunda, when you were in Vrindavan, India, where Lord Krishna appeared, and you saw thousands of people chanting Hare Krishna, did it strengthen your faith in the idea of chanting to see a whole city living Hare Krishna? Jadi, yeah, it fortifies you. It definitely helps. It is fantastic to be in a place where the whole town is doing it. And I also had the idea that they were all knocked out at the idea of seeing some white person chanting on beats. Vrindavan is one of the holiest cities in India. Everyone, everywhere, chants Hare Krishna. It was the most fantastic experience. Mukunda, you write in your book, most of the world is fooling about, especially the people who think they control the world and the community. The presidents, the politicians, the military, etc., are all jerking about, acting as if they are lord over their own domains. That is basically problem 1 on the planet. George, that is right. Unless you are doing some kind of God consciousness thing and you know that He is the one who is really in charge, you are just building up a lot of karma and not really helping yourself or anybody else. There is a point in me where it is beyond and seeing the state of the world today. It is so screwed up. It is terrible and it will be getting worse and worse. More concrete everywhere, more pollution, more radioactivity. There is no wilderness left, no pure air. They are chopping the forest down. They are polluting all the oceans. In one sense, I am pessimistic about the future of the planet. These big guys don't realize for everything they do, there is a reaction. You have to pay. That is karma. Mukunda, do you think there is any hope? George, yes. One by one, everybody has got to escape Maya. Everybody has to burn out his karma and escape reincarnation and all that. Stop thinking that if Britain or America, or Russia or the West or whatever becomes superior, then we will beat them. And then we will all have rest and live happily ever after. That doesn't work. The best thing you can give is God consciousness. Manifest your own divinity first. The truth is there. It is right within us all. Understand what you are. If people would just wake up to what is real, there will be no misery in the world. I guess chanting is a pretty good place to start. Mukunda, thanks so much, George. George, all right. Hare Krishna.